The United States Army Corps of Engineers is fighting a war it cannot win. On the largest river in North America, a battle is being waged not with soldiers, but with dredges. Not against an enemy, but against physics itself. And the stakes are the entire economic spine of the United States. Right now, the Mississippi River's flow has collapsed. At Memphis, Tennessee, the vital artery that carries 60% of all American grain exports to the world is pumping at just 28% of its normal volume. The consequence is not a slowdown. It is a multi-billion-dollar choke point, a catastrophic failure rippling through the global food supply chain. This is not a drought. Let us know in the comments if you've ever seen a river this low where you live. This is a fundamental shift, a new baseline. And Memphis sits at the epicenter of a crisis with two faces, a river that is vanishing from the surface, and an invisible ocean of ancient water beneath the city that is its own ticking clock. What you are about to see is bigger than one river. It is a warning. A huge number of people who watch these reports forget to hit the subscribe button, but your support is what allows us to do this kind of deep dive reporting. It is urgent we get this information out, and subscribing is the single most important way you can help. Please, take 1 second. Let's begin. The numbers coming out of Memphis do not make sense. In October of 2023, the stream gauge on the Mississippi River hit minus 11.91 feet, a negative number, a measurement that implies the river is less than empty, an impossibility that has led to a dangerous misconception. The river is not dry. The negative reading does not mean the water is gone. It means the water level has fallen below an arbitrary line, a zero reference point established in 1954, set well above the actual river bottom. But the reality that number represents is arguably worse. The river has become a shallow, treacherous graveyard for commerce. Barges, the lifeblood of inland shipping, are designed to float on a 9-foot deep channel, a highway of water maintained by federal mandate. Today, that highway is disappearing. A standard 15-barge tow on the Mississippi moves a volume of cargo equivalent to over 1,000 semi-trucks. It is the most efficient, most cost-effective way to move bulk commodities, grain, steel, petroleum, coal, ever devised, and it is entirely dependent on water depth. When the river drops, a barge that is designed to carry 1,500 tons of soybeans might only be loaded with 900 tons. Any more, and its steel hull risks scraping the bottom, grounding the entire tow, and creating a traffic jam of stalled commerce that can stretch for miles. In 2023, the low water crisis cost the American economy an estimated $20 billion. Shippers paid premiums of over $200 per ton just to get their grain moved, a cost that gets passed from the farmer to the port to the foreign buyer, and eventually to the price of food on shelves around the world. The 589 million tons of cargo that typically transit this system every year, saving the nation $12.5 billion in transport costs compared to rail or truck, are now held hostage by a few feet of missing water. Memphis is the choke point. It is the nation's second-largest inland port, the place where the agricultural bounty of the Midwest meets the global shipping network. When Memphis grinds to a halt, the system breaks, and for 4 consecutive years the system has been breaking. Federal hydrologists no longer call this a drought. Mike Clay, the hydrology branch chief at the Memphis Engineer District, now speaks of flash droughts and a new baseline. The river that America was built around is changing faster than the infrastructure can keep up. A record low set in July of 1988, 0.7 feet, stood for over 3 decades as a worst-case scenario. That record was shattered in October 2022. Then it was shattered again a year later. The records are not just falling, they are being pulverized. And as the fresh water drains out of the river, something else is creeping in from the sea. A silent, invisible invasion from the Gulf of Mexico that threatens to poison the drinking water for millions. But to understand that threat, you first have to understand the paradox of Memphis, a city on the banks of one of the world's largest rivers that doesn't drink a single drop of it. In 2005, the state of Mississippi sued the state of Tennessee for $615 million. The accusation was not about borders or taxes. It was about water, invisible water. Mississippi claimed that the city of Memphis was drilling wells that acted like straws, siphoning billions of gallons of pristine groundwater across the state line, effectively stealing a sovereign natural resource from right beneath their feet. What would you do if you found out your neighbor was stealing your water from a mile underground? It's a wild concept. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The lawsuit went to the Supreme Court, twice. It became one of the most significant interstate water conflicts in modern American history, and it exposed a hydrological truth that defines Memphis's existence. The city survives not on the muddy, unpredictable currents of the Mississippi River, but on a hidden underground ocean called the Memphis Sand Aquifer. This is not an ordinary aquifer. This is a geological treasure, a massive subterranean reservoir of sand and gravel saturated with water that fell as rain 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. Filtered over millennia through natural layers of clay, the water is so pure it requires almost no treatment before being pumped to the city's taps. Memphis is the largest city in the United States, and possibly the world, to rely 100% on groundwater for its municipal supply. The city's utility, Memphis Light, Gas and Water, operates over 160 wells that draw from this ancient source, providing some of the highest quality, lowest cost drinking water in the nation. This aquifer is the foundation of the city's life, its economy, its future, and for decades, Memphis treated it as its own private reservoir. Mississippi's lawyers argued that the aquifer, which they call the Sparta Aquifer in their state, was their sovereign property. They even presented a geological theory that there were two separate aquifers, divided by a subterranean wall of clay, to bolster their claim of ownership. But hydrologists from the United States Geological Survey, experts like Michael Bradley, proved them wrong. They demonstrated conclusively that the Memphis Sand and Sparta Aquifer were one and the same, a single, vast, interconnected resource that flowed slowly but surely between the states. In November of 2021, the Supreme Court issued a final ruling. They rejected Mississippi's claim of theft, but established a new precedent. The aquifer was an interstate resource. No single state owned it. All states that sit atop it must share it equitably. The water war was over, but a new, more existential threat was just beginning. The very same climate patterns starving the Mississippi River of rainfall were also threatening the aquifer's long-term health. The Memphis Sand Aquifer is not a sealed, static tank. It gets replenished, or recharged, by rainfall that soaks into the ground in a specific area of West Tennessee. This is its recharge zone. When that region experiences prolonged drought, as it has for the past several years, less water soaks down to refill what the city pumps out. The balance is disrupted. This is the great paradox. As the river on the surface drops to historic lows, threatening the city's economy, a lack of rain across the basin silently jeopardizes its supply of drinking water. The nonprofit group Protect Our Aquifer has been sounding the alarm for years, arguing in reports like The Blueprint that the city's most precious resource is effectively unmanaged. We must begin treating and managing the Memphis Sand Aquifer as the foundation of our livelihoods, they warn, because it truly is. The water that Memphians drink today fell as rain when the Roman Empire was at its peak. It is a finite inheritance, and the compounding rainfall deficit, year after year, puts that inheritance at risk in a way that the visible drama on the river's surface completely obscures. Memphis isn't just a river city, it's an aquifer city that happens to be next to a river, and both are now in crisis. If this story has opened your eyes to a crisis you didn't know was happening, hit the like button. And if you have family that relies on logistics, on the price of food at the grocery store, or lives anywhere in this vast river basin, share this video with them. Understanding this isn't just academic. It matters. The war against the river bottom is fought by a machine that looks like it was designed by a mad genius. It is called a dustpan dredge, and it is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' primary weapon in keeping the Mississippi's navigation channel from silting over completely. Imagine a floating factory, hundreds of feet long, anchored in the middle of the river. From its bow extends a long arm that lowers a massive, 35-foot wide suction head, the dustpan, to the riverbed. This is an underwater vacuum cleaner of staggering power. The dredge Hurley, one of the Corps' workhorses on the lower Mississippi, can suck up 5,000 cubic yards of sediment per hour. That is enough sand and silt to fill 68 backyard swimming pools, every hour, for 24 hours a day. The sediment is mixed with water into a slurry, pumped through a pipeline that can be over a mile long, and discharged outside the navigation channel, where the current can carry it further downstream. It is a monumental, unending task of hydrological housecleaning. And since the low water crisis began in earnest in 2022, the dredging has not stopped. It has become a year-round emergency operation. Leading this effort through 4 consecutive years of emergency was Major General Kimberly A. Peoples. As the commanding general of the USACE Mississippi Valley Division and president of the Mississippi River Commission, she was responsible for keeping this artery of commerce open against impossible odds. Her tenure was defined by this crisis. She oversaw the deployment of every available dredge, the constant surveying of the channel, the daily battle against shoaling, where sediment piles up and makes the river impassable. In June of 2026, in a ceremony presided over by senior USACE leader Lieutenant General William H. Butch Graham Jr., Maj. General Peoples relinquished her command and retired. She left in the middle of the fight, a symbolic marker of just how relentless and exhausting this new reality has become. The dredges keep working. The river keeps dropping. The problem is no longer an event to be managed. It is a permanent condition to be endured. The issue originates hundreds of miles upstream. The water level in Memphis is dictated almost entirely by what happens at a place called Cairo, Illinois. This is the critical confluence where the Ohio River joins the upper Mississippi to form the mighty lower Mississippi. When the Ohio River basin is starved of rain, as it has been by a persistent super El Niño that shifted rainfall patterns, the lower Mississippi starves with it. Hydrologists at the National Weather Service's Lower Mississippi River Forecast Center, people like Jeff Grashel, watch the Ohio Valley with anxiety. "We are seeing some signs of a little bit of rainfall," he noted during a brief reprieve, "but nothing that will get us out of the low water situation." His words underscore the scale of the problem. A thunderstorm in Kentucky is not enough. A week of rain in Ohio is not enough. The entire system is running at a deficit, a water debt that has accumulated over half a decade. The Corps of Engineers is not fighting to win. They are fighting to not lose. They are vacuuming the bottom of a river that is being slowly starved from its source, just to keep the barges moving, just to keep the lights on for the American economy. It's a desperate, multi-billion-dollar holding action against gravity and climate. And hundreds of miles to the south, their colleagues are fighting a different kind of invader, one that you cannot dredge, cannot see, and cannot easily stop. Salt water is heavier than fresh water. This is a simple fact of physics with devastating consequences. When the flow of the Mississippi River weakens, its immense volume of fresh water is no longer powerful enough to push back the salty tide of the Gulf of Mexico. The ocean begins to intrude, but it does not mix in evenly from the surface down. Instead, a dense, heavy wedge of salt water creeps upstream along the very bottom of the river channel, an invisible tongue of brine sliding beneath the lighter, fresher water on top. The leading edge of this wedge, its toe, can be 15 miles upriver before any salt is even detectable at the surface. It is a stealthy, bottom-dwelling monster. In the summer of 2023, this monster came for Plaquemines Parish. This long, narrow strip of Louisiana, dangling south of New Orleans into the Gulf, is the front line. Its communities, like Port Sulphur and Pointe à la Hache, draw their municipal drinking water directly from the Mississippi River. As the saltwater wedge silently pushed its way north along the riverbed, it reached their water intake pipes. The result was a public health crisis that lasted for over 200 days. Tap water became corrosive. It had a saline taste that was immediately noticeable. The Environmental Protection Agency sets a public advisory limit of 250 parts per million for chloride, salt, in drinking water. In Plaquemines Parish, the levels soared far beyond that. Residents were warned not to drink the water. It could damage pipes, ruin hot water heaters, and pose risks for people on low-sodium diets or with kidney issues. For months, the parish had to rely on reverse osmosis plants, brought in on barges and truckloads of bottled water, to provide for its citizens. The wedge kept moving. As it crept past Plaquemines, it began to threaten the suburbs of New Orleans itself. The water treatment plant in Bellechasse, a community of about 10,000 people, became the next point of concern. Hydrologists watched its advance daily, a slow-motion disaster inching its way toward a major American metropolitan area. To fight it, the Army Corps of Engineers had to build a wall. An underwater wall. At a location called Myrtle Grove, at River Mile Marker 64, the Corps began an emergency construction project. They dredged sediment from the bottom of the river and used it to build a massive underwater levee, a barrier officially called a sill. This sill is a 1,500-foot wide ridge of compacted earth piled up on the riverbed, rising to a height of about 45 feet below the surface. It is not designed to stop the river's flow, which continues over the top. It is designed specifically to block the dense saltwater wedge creeping along the bottom. It is a desperate, temporary measure, a physical barrier built in the dark, under crushing pressure, to hold back the ocean. The Corps has to build this sill now with increasing regularity. It is another piece of emergency infrastructure that has become part of the new routine. Once heavy rains return to the upper basin and the river's flow increases, the powerful freshwater current will wash the sill away, and the Corps will have to build it all over again the next time the river drops. And everyone knows there will be a next time. I know. This is the second time I'm asking. But our analytics show that a shockingly high number of you who value this reporting and watch all the way to the end still haven't subscribed. Hitting that button is totally free for you, but it is the absolute lifeline for this channel. It lets us afford to keep digging into these critical stories. I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd take a moment. Thank you. The pieces of this crisis are scattered across 1,000 miles, but they form a single, terrifying picture. A new era is upon us. The phrase new baseline, once a piece of cautious academic jargon, is now the operational reality for the people managing the Mississippi River. 4 consecutive years of historically low water are no longer an anomaly. They are the new normal. The 2026 Super El Niño, which brought deluges to some parts of the country, was a curse for the Mississippi Basin. It dropped its moisture in the wrong places, saturating the west coast while leaving the Ohio Valley, the Mississippi's main water source, critically dry. The river's fate is decided not in Memphis or New Orleans, but in the weather patterns over states 1,000 miles away, and those patterns have fundamentally shifted. This is no longer a story about water levels. It is a story about systemic risk. The interconnectedness of our modern world is both a strength and a profound vulnerability. The lack of snowpack in the Appalachians means a farmer in Iowa cannot ship his corn efficiently. That inefficiency means a food processor in Asia pays a higher price. That higher price is felt by a family in Europe buying bread. The system is a chain, and the first link, the river itself, is corroding. The response from the Army Corps of Engineers, while heroic in its scale and execution, is fundamentally reactive. Dredging the bottom of the river is like giving CPR to a patient who has a chronic disease. It keeps them alive, but it does not cure the underlying condition. Building an underwater sill to block saltwater is like putting a bandage on a breached dam. It is a temporary fix for a problem that is permanent and growing. The real solution would require a complete rethinking of how we manage water across the entire continent. It would involve renegotiating agricultural practices, industrial water use, and urban development across dozens of states. It would mean confronting the 100-year-old water allocation compacts that were written for a climate that no longer exists. It would mean making political choices so difficult that no one wants to touch them. And so, the dredges continue their work, the barges continue to run light, and the saltwater continues to press upstream. In Memphis, the twin crises unfold in parallel. On the surface, the city watches its economic engine sputter, held hostage by the whims of rainfall in another part of the country. Beneath their feet, they continue to draw from a 3,000-year-old savings account of pure water, hoping the rains that are failing the river do not also fail their hidden reservoir. The city is a case study in 21st century hydrology, entirely insulated from the quality of the river at its doorstep, yet completely exposed to the quantity of water falling across the entire basin. They could be the first major American river city to find itself running dry, not because its river has vanished, but because its hidden lifeboat, the Aquifer, has been overdrawn in a world with less rain to replenish it. The lights of the dredge Hurley burn through the night, a lonely sentinel in the vast darkness of the river. Its diesel engines hum a constant, low thrum, the sound of a battle against sediment, against gravity, against time. The men and women on board are not just digging a channel, they are trying to hold open an artery that is slowly closing, trying to buy time. But the river keeps dropping, the saltwater keeps creeping, and the sky remains stubbornly clear. The question is no longer if the system will break. It is what happens